Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jnanam Shraveshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Shnuke Bhakti Bhakti.
Let's read the translations together. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, the very names of conquest, one should offer respect and obeisance to the personality of Godhead Narayan. Under Narayan and Vishnu, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srinath Vasudev, the author. By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And love and service to the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established and irrevocable fact. Hare Krishna, everyone. Good morning. So today we're continuing the 7th chapter of the 11th canto. And can anyone tell us what's happening right now? Like in the Bhagavatam? No one raises their hand. I'll have to call out someone. Shall learn from Gopi Prabhu on what he's raising his hand.
Learning about the 24 gurus that the Avaduta Brahmana was observing all around in the world.
That's correct. And someone else, who is talking to whom right now? Like who is narrating, or the conversation is between like what people? Stephen. Krishna and Uddhava. That's going a little back, but right now the conversation is between.
I don't know.
I'm sorry. The Avaduta, King Yadu and Avaduta Brahmana. Like Krishna is telling Uddhava about the great King Yadu, from whom the Yadu dynasty started, and Krishna is part of that dynasty. So Krishna is telling Uddhava about the meeting of King Yadu and the Avaduta, and we're hearing about. So this Avaduta Brahmana was very like good-looking person, young person, very learned person, and then when King Yadu saw him, he was like you look like you're such an like amazing person, but seems like you are very detached. Also, like what's happening? Like where do you learn your secrets of like being happy? Like when we go out on books, we ask people like you seem like a spiritual person. Like what's your secret? So this is what. But this time King Yadu was really curious. Like without having to give knowledge, he was actually like seeking knowledge. Like what's your secret? And then the Brahmana is telling a story about all the different places, different parts of nature, 24 gurus that he has had in nature, from observing different parts of nature, what he's learning from each of them. And Sesha Prabhu on Friday gave a summary, and he was talking about all this. He touched upon some gurus out of them. Does anyone remember any of those like gurus, any of those parts of nature? Shout out a name out of 24, if you remember any one of them. The wasp. Moth.
The dancing girl.
Yeah, I think there's a young girl dancing. Maybe she's dancing. And it's weird. Yeah, I think it was mentioned. And there was also the honey thief. Yeah, and there was bumblebee or honeybee. Okay, that's awesome. So today we are learning about, the title of today's class is The Foolish Pigeon. So we're going to learn like what we learned from the foolishness of the pigeon. So we will start reading. Me and Nick, we're going to read. Oops. Okay, we can start reading from verse 52. You wanna start? Sure. Are we doing the same scriptures? No, we'll translate the translations and then we'll go sense. Okay. So text 52. One should never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything. Otherwise, one will have to experience great suffering, just like the foolish pigeon. Now, before we go into the story, this itself seems like a very strong, comment. Like one should never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything, like even for a family, so it's like deciding off on a very heavy note. Yeah. And so let's see what the foolish pigeon did that we're talking about. There once was a pigeon who lived in the forest along with his wife. He had built a nest within a tree and lived there for several years in her company. The two pigeons were very much devoted to their household duties. Their hearts being tied together by sentimental affection, they were each attracted by their other's glances, bodily features, and state of mind. Thus, they completely bound each other in affection. Naively trusting in the future, they carried out their acts of resting, sitting, walking, standing, conversing, playing, eating, and so forth, as a loving couple among the trees of the forest. Whenever she desired anything, O king, the she-pigeon would flatteringly cajole her husband, and he in turn would gratify her by faithfully doing whatever she wanted, even with great personal difficulty. Thus, he could not control his senses in her association. Then the female pigeon experienced her first pregnancy. When the time arrived, the chaste lady delivered a number of eggs within the nest in the presence of her husband. When the time was ripe, baby pigeons with tender limbs and feathers, created by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, were born from those eggs. The two pigeons became most affectionate to their children and took great pleasure in listening to their awkward chirping. It sounded very sweet to the parents. Thus, with love, they began to raise little birds who were born of them. The parent birds became very joyful by observing the soft wings of their children, their chirping, their lovely innocent movements around the nest, and their attempts to jump and fly. Seeing their children happy, the parents were also happy. Their hearts bound to each other by affection. The foolish birds, completely bewildered by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, continued to take care of the young offspring who had been born to them. One day, the two heads of the family went out to find food for the children. Being very anxious to feed their offspring properly, they wandered all over the forest for a long time. At that time, a certain hunter who happened to be wandering through the forest saw the young pigeons moving about near the nest. Spreading out his net, he captured them all. The pigeon and his wife were always anxious for the maintenance of their children, and they were wandering in the forest for that purpose. Having obtained proper food, they now returned to their nest. When the lady pigeon caught sight of her own children trapped within the hunter's net, she was overwhelmed with anguish, and crying out, she rushed towards them as they cried out to her in return. The lady pigeon had always allowed herself to be bound by the ropes of intense material affection, and thus her mind was overwhelmed by anguish. Being in the grip of the illusory energy of the Lord, she completely forgot herself, and rushing forward to help her helpless children, she was immediately bound in the hunter's net. Seeing his old children, who were more dear to him than life itself, fatally bound in the hunter's net along with his dearest wife, whom he considered equal in every way to himself, the poor male pigeon began to lament wretchedly. The male pigeon said, "Alas, just see how I am now destroyed. I am obviously a great fool, for I did not properly execute pious activities. I could not satisfy myself, nor could I fulfill the purpose of life. My dear family, which was the basis of my religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification, is now hopelessly ruined. My wife and I were an ideal match. She always faithfully obeyed me, and in fact, she accepted me as a worshipable deity. But now, seeing her children lost and her home empty, she has left me behind and gone to heaven with her saintly children. Now I am a wretched person living in an empty house. My wife is dead. My children are dead. Why should I possibly want to live? My heart is so pained by separation from my family that life itself has become simply suffering." As the father pigeon wretchedly stared at his poor children trapped in the net and on the verge of death, ethically struggling to free themselves, his mind went blank, and thus he himself fell into the hunter's net.
The crow hunter, having fulfilled his desire by capturing the head pigeon, his wife, and all of their children, set off for his own home.
In this way, one is too attached to family life, becomes disturbed at heart. Like the pigeon, he tries to find pleasure in mundane sex attraction. Busily engaged in maintaining his own family, the miserly person is fated to suffer greatly, along with all his family members.
The doors of liberation are opened wide to one who has achieved human life. But if a human being simply devotes himself to a family life, like the foolish bird in this story, then he is to be considered as one who has climbed to a high place only to trip and fall down.
That was the last verse. And what an amazing story, right? Like if the pigeons were to make a movie, like the pigeon people were to make a movie, and it's such a tragic ending to the story. Like it's such a happy beginning and so much in love with each other. And well, even in like human life, this seems like perfect family, like the husband and wife that love each other and they have kids, sweet kids. And as they're growing up, they're making baby sounds, they're walking around, they're falling down, and it's very like cute to watch. They're probably recording it to upload later. And as everything is going on, suddenly, like one day, tragedy happens. And mother, instead of like, is so attached to her children that she falls into the net. And the husband, like you would expect sometimes the male to be a logical person, but he's also so much affectionate, so much attached to his wife and children. It says that his mind went blank and he could not even think like, what should I live for? And he fell into the hunter's net also. So it's quite a like gripping story, but and a lot of the things that are mentioned in the story seem like a very normal part of human life. Like what's wrong with like husband and wife being attached to each other and being an ideal match for each other, and husband fulfilling the wife's desires, and it's like it's things we actually like look forward to like in family life. And but it said that we have something to learn from this example of the foolish pigeon. So before we get into the verse for today, okay, let's I would just like to ask you, what do you think is meant by in this verse by saying excessive affection or concern? So what is excessive affection? Senseless. What would like, can you explain a little more? Not just another word, in a few words. Or like, what do you mean by excessive affection in opposed to like just someone is affectionate, but it's talking about excessive affection? So what strikes your mind when you read like it's too much, like Robert?
To do so at like the detriment of like greater spiritual life or your own life or greater purpose.
That's good, yeah. Yes, thank you, Gopi.
Similar to what Robert says, you can have a certain type of affection or concern, but beyond a certain point, it becomes counterproductive. It becomes a waste of energy or detrimental, as you said.
I'm just thinking, yes, something along those lines. This excessive affection normally it becomes irrational at some point, or just illogical. Or sometimes not just spiritually, but even materially sometimes.
That's true. And so all of you guys are mentioning that how it's like too much becomes counterproductive for one's own self and other to the other person, also to the other person. And we have to start thinking that when we mention about affection, so there has to be some relation between the person, like the person who's feeling that affection and the person who's feeling the affection towards. And so this, if you read this purport, it's explained very beautifully, like what is the basis of that like relation? And based on that relation, we can distinguish something as being excessive or just like normal. So let's get into the verse for today. Nick, would you want to read?
Nati snaha prasana kova
Nati sneha
kartavyak vati kenachit kurvan vindeta santapam kapota ivadinadi.
Nati sneha prasango va
Prasangova
Tavya kwapi kena ched Kurvan vendeta santapam Kapota iva dinadhi. Someone else?
Nati sana prasango va
Nati sneha
Prasangova
Partha va kaprapi knachit
Kartavya kena ched
Kravan vedeta sanatpam
Kurvan
Videta Santapam
Kapota eva danadihi.
Kapota Iva Dinati.
Questions?
Nati
Nati
Sneha Prasangova Kataya Papi Kena Chet Videta Santapam Kapota Iva Dinati.
Let's do it together.
Not
Ati
Sneha, excess affection, Prasana, close affection, Pa or Kartavya, one should manifest, Pa be ever, Kinship with anyone or anything, Kurban, so doing, Vindeta, one will experience, Santaham, great distress, Kapota, the pigeon, Iva, just as, Dinadi, crippled minded.
Translation together.
One should never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything. Otherwise, one will have to experience great suffering, just like the foolish pigeon.
So you can know that it says for anyone or anything, and but it's still not very clear, like in this translation. So we can hope that the purport, the commentary by the disciples of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, they would shed some more light on what we mean by excessive affection. Would anyone like to read the purport for us, please? Bia.
The Sanskrit prefix are.
Can you use a mic, please?
The Sanskrit prefix art or excessive indicates affection or attachment in which there is no Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Surdham Sarva Bhutanam. The Lord is the eternal well-wisher of every living being. The Lord is so affectionate that he sits in the heart of every conditioned soul and accompanies him throughout his endless wandering in the kingdom of Maya, patiently waiting for the conditioned soul to come back home, back to Godhead. Thus, the Lord makes all arrangements for the eternal happiness of every living entity. The best way for anyone to show compassion and affection to all living beings is to become a preacher on behalf of Lord Krishna and assist the Lord in reclaiming the fallen souls. If our affection or attachment for others is based on bodily sense gratification in the name of society, friendship, and love, that excessive, unwanted affection, ati sneha, will cause burning pain and at the time of the breaking or destruction of the relationship. Now the story of the foolish pigeon will be narrated. A similar story is described in the 7th canto, 2nd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, told by Yamraj to the mourning widows of King Suyagya.
Okay, so hope like there's some more explanation of what the verse means by ati sneha, like too much affection. And here it's stated that based on the relation, like if our affection or attachment for others is based on bodily sense gratification in the name of society, friendship, and love. So if the affection or the relation is based on bodily attachment, then that itself is ati sneha. Like we're not just talking about we are affectionate to someone and we become too much affectionate, but even if our affection for someone is based on the idea that they're going to satisfy me, they're going to serve me, and I'm going to get something out of them, like this object or this person, I'm going to get something out of them based on how they're related to my body, how they help me, like how they make my body feel, how they make my mind feel. That affection itself is excessive. But if that affection is based on the spiritual connection that one has, like we have with the devotees amongst ourselves, Our connection is not based on because we are from a particular country or because we're related by blood. But we are all connected, like we are friends with each other and we are affectionate towards each other because we're all connected. The center of our relation is Krishna. So we are parts and parcels of Krishna. So when that understanding is in the center of our mind and at the center of our being affection towards each other, that cannot be excessive affection. So that's what I understood from the purpose. Like the same thing.
Yeah, I really like the translation, the way it's written. It's almost like a warning. As we go through this experience of the body and as a jiva in this material world, we get constant reminders that we have a certain goal while we're here in the material world. And this is one of them. This is a warning saying this, especially family life, which is a great opportunity for you to learn how to love. You know, in the last couple of verses, we learned gurus everywhere. This material world is built in such a way that we can learn from everybody. And I see family life being just one way of learning how to express your love. But it is a warning that this is still part of the material world and we are still conditioned. And so we need to be careful not to become over affectionate and overindulge on family life based on those sense gratification.
Wonderful. It leads me into like thinking that we started off by saying that this is quite a heavy statement, and we see that in Bhagavatam. There's a lot of times there's such like so-called heavy statements, which for someone who is in family life, it might seem to point out that family life is not good, or like you're probably in trouble, like being too affectionate in family life. So I just makes me wonder, or makes you wonder also, like why is Shukadeva Goswami like being such like heavy in the Bhagavatam? Like what is his purpose? You don't like to share? I think Shukadeva Goswami's purpose is Gopi Prabhu.
I just want to make sure I understand. Do you mean specifically heavy on this topic of family life?
Yeah, like usually I seems like there comes back a theme of being detached from family life, or being a theme of being renounced over in Bhagavatam. So why is Shukadeva Goswami like doing that? Like in 5th canto also, teachings of Lord Rishabdev to his sons, in the 2nd canto also in the beginning. There's like quite a lot of like statements like this. So what are we trying to learn from this?
I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but one thing I'm thinking about is that in these bodily relationships, what happens is you kind of put yourself in the place of Krishna. So you are blocking someone else from realizing their true relationship with Krishna. Like if you go into a marriage and you're a husband, but you don't have any Krishna consciousness, then you're basically implying to your wife that you're the one that can give her ultimate protection, ultimate satisfaction. And so you're just kind of living a lie, and you're blocking that person off from Krishna, which is obviously not good. So yeah, I think there's a lot of emphasis and warnings about this, so that we can realize we just need to step aside and help each other with that relationship with Krishna.
Yeah, I like that point. I think Shukadeva, if we zoom back, we can see that Parikshit Maharaj is one of the central characters of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam is narrated by Shukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. And what is the stage of life that Parikshit Maharaj is in?
This is sannyas.
Yeah, I mean, he's about to he has 7 days. He has been cursed that he has to live this world in 7 days. So for someone who's just about at the end of life, like it makes sense that all Shukadeva Goswami is trying to tell him is like how to be renounced, because he's not going to tell him like this is how you get proper satisfaction in family life, because he's been through all that. Now his stage is how to transcend all that and focus his mind on Krishna. So we can understand that based on the context, it makes sense for Shukadeva Goswami to be a little like heavy, and so that he doesn't have any still ponderings about family life or any material attachments. But also like what Gopi said, these things are like warnings to us. Like we might think that this is a verse, maybe it applies to the materialists because they are very, very affectionate in the family life and they're very attached to their nation, to the country, and it's a warning to them. But we as devotees, we don't have to worry about it, because like we were talking about, like our center is Krishna, so we don't have to worry about like being excessively affectionate. But it's also a warning to us. Like personally for me, I was thinking that I was a brahmachari like recently, and since I've graduated, I could be thinking that I had a lot of discipline and restriction in like brahmachari life, but now that I have like moved on to the next step, like I can just be like no more discipline. I can like enjoy however I want, and I can just like plan about family life, plan about the future, and yeah, nothing to worry. Like I'm still chanting my rounds, so what's there to worry? Like the renounced people, they can be more like this is for them, but it's not particularly for me. But then made me think that reading these verses time and again, like makes us realize that it's like going in spiritual life is said to be like walking on a razor's edge, like a blades edge. So like what could happen is that you're too complacent, and you could end up being what's described as a grihamedi, or one who is in family life just for the sake of satisfying his own senses. So these verses are in a way like keep reminding us like again and again that like don't be too complacent. Your focus still has to be like how to serve Krishna, not how to like satisfy your own senses. And it makes us actually humble. Like grihasthas in general, like people in family life, if you think that we are like brahmacharis and then come grihasthas, like you could be at a higher status of like the varnas or the ashrams. So you could be proud of that I'm graduated from being like a monk. Now I could enjoy as I wanted, as I want. I'm in a higher status of life also. So it's just supposed to make you humble that although this is family life is said to be a license for some like sense gratification, it's not the center, it's not the main purpose of like household life. The purpose of like household life is to get like whatever like little like sense gratification we can get from the ashram, but keep our mind that we are intended to serve Krishna and his dear devotees. So that's my understanding.
Um, well, I think what you said is a really good point, because whenever we think we got something down, we don't. And that's an opportunity for Krishna to throw you a challenge. And he's infinite. So there's an infinite amount of difficulty in this game. So he can keep challenging you. So we always have to keep being humble and asking for Krishna's mercy for help, because it's really with him. It's not us thinking that we can do this, that I figured this out on my own. It's because of Krishna's help that I can continue doing this. And I continue to need his help to be able to stay detached from this material world. But I want to move the discussion then to realizing that this, as much as we like to consider ourselves devotees and advanced, this will happen to us because it's a tricky world. So I think we should open up the conversation to figure out if when we get stuck in this position, because we kind of talked about, okay, now that we read this verse, we know what to do for the future. But now let's plan for what happens if we're actually stuck in this, because the problem in this story was that this pigeon wasn't prepared for this situation, which is part of the foolishness, is that he should have known that whether it was in that day, whether it was a hunter, the body was going to die, and his children were going to die, and his wife was going to die, and his his sense gratification was eventually coming to an end. But he wasn't aware of that. So when the day come, he wasn't prepared. So let's open up the discussion to decide, okay, how can we prepare for when this happens to us, so that we don't recklessly just get stuck? Because being unprepared, the two pigeons, the mom and the dad, ended up also getting trapped because they weren't thinking in the moment. So please, I want to hear what everyone thinks about that.
I think chant more. And just chant. Keep chanting. That's about it.
It's an awesome suggestion. And how do you think that will help our mind be prepared?
Well, I think when you get into those ruts, it's the holy name that gets you out. If you really just put everything
all the frustration or all the angst or anxiety that you feel into your job. Just try to, offer that, with the humility and understanding that that's all you have to offer in that particular moment. It can help you work through, at least that's what I've been working with recently. So.
Yeah, that's a very nice point. Like what you're saying that like realizing that holy name will save us, or like Krishna's name or Krishna will save us, and having that as our shelter. Because it said that in this discussion, like in the translations that we were reading, said that the male pigeon and the female pigeon acted like each other's shelter. Like male pigeon had nothing else like you could think about. Like my wife is going to satisfy me and my kids. Like for him, the shelter was his like wife and kids. And it's described in Srimad Bhagavatam that these family members or friends or relatives or country, these are all fallible soldiers. Like we can depend on them, but they are fallible. They cannot let us, like they cannot make us win the ultimate battle, which is the battle against like repeated birth and death. Like if we put all our money or depend completely on these aspects as a shelter, then they're fallible. So ultimately we are going to like end up like being disappointed. But I think some
Govinda.
there's a question and should people have a comment?
I was just gonna say, also just by meditating on the fact that we're not our body, and immersing ourselves in spiritual activities, that we feel less like we are our bodies, because then you realize that all of us actually live through death, and so it's not, there's no like eternal, like there's no, like I don't know how to say it, like there's no like that like there's life after death. And for people that that take to Krishna consciousness, either they'll attain like a better birth, or they'll reach, or they'll go back to Godhead. So
yeah,
like that.
Yeah, like the verse we read in the morning, the verse of the week, it says that in this endeavor there's no loss or diminution. Like if you're just attached to the body comes an end. But if you are realized for the fact that we are beyond the body, so whatever activities we do, like relations we cultivate, like based on the not bodily platform, the soul platform, that doesn't end, that endeavor that continues.
I was thinking regarding your question, like that it's really the pigeons got into the situation because of lack of knowledge or ignorance. Because if they had an understanding of who they are and what their position with Krishna is, and they would be okay, right? So I was thinking the importance of hearing to Prabhupada and reading his books, especially maybe in family life, so that you're constantly, your intelligence is clear or sharp. Otherwise, it's very easy, like you said, to get into that pigeon lifestyle if you don't have the constant vibrations, transcendental vibrations going. So I think it's important not to be in ignorance when one transitions with those things like that.
I'll add something to that. So on top of intelligence, what's also very important is, the thing is that the pigeon, the reason that he wants to show so much love to his wife is because as jivas, we want to express our love. But when we don't have the intelligence, then we do it in ways that aren't productive. So on top of reading books to understand that knowledge, we still want to express that love. And so after learning how to do it, because we can become book smart and say, okay, well, the way to direct my love is towards God. We need to create an environment that's suitable for that. Because if we don't have that environment, then that craving is going to get the best of us, and we will start to look for other ways to satisfy our senses. And that one way can be through a partner and through start a family life. But if every day we practice and we get that taste of loving Krishna, then it becomes easy when that challenge comes, because we already feel satisfied. We don't have to look elsewhere to get that satisfaction.
Anthony, Jonathan, and then Trish.
Hare Krishna, thank you for class. Yeah, I think the pigeon was bewildered. He was unprepared for an event like this. And if he would have had Krishna at the center of his mind, he might have been able to focus his attention on maybe his pastimes and then work through the situation and maybe do something instead of just falling into the net. So if he would have kept Krishna in his heart and on his mind, he might have been able to navigate it better instead of just being like stunned. Like, oh, I'm prepared because I hold Krishna with me, and us together can possibly navigate the situation compared to me alone being awestruck and
Yeah.
afraid.
It's like you're saying about a moment to like introspect and moment to reflect instead of, he didn't have that. He just like fell into it. It happened, right? If he had Krishna in his mind, then maybe he could have thought at that moment, like, what's the right thing to do?
Yes, like, I have you with me, please help me guide me through this situation to save my family. And maybe if maybe I can get through this and next time I'll know not to be a pigeon, you know? And maybe I can channel better qualities.
Yeah, before I get to Jonathan, I was thinking that sometimes in movies we see that when such a tragedy happens to the hero and like his family, the hero just doesn't give up. Then he's like not the hero of the movie anymore. Like he thinks like, how can I like rescue my kids? How can I like help my family? He's just not. And that's his intelligence also. He's applying there. He's not just like completely believing that, oh my God, they're caught. And that also comes, that intelligence comes from practicing spiritual life. And Krishna gives you the intelligence at the time of distress, at the time of like when there's a challenging situation, you won't just be bewildered and fall for it. You can actually like, there has to be some fast thinking and you'll probably be able to do it. Thank you. Jonathan?
All right, well, thank you guys very much for a wonderful class so far. You're both very handsome and intelligent men, and I will try not to become attached.
To us? Oh,
I very much relate to this story about the pigeons, and I have a lot that I could say on it as well, but I think the most important thing is not putting anybody in your life in the position where the Lord should be, you know, putting the Lord first. And that goes both ways, you know, with both people in the relationship. And I think since returning to Krishna consciousness, one of the biggest kind of revelations that I learned with having put the Lord first in my life is that also women and children come from him, you know, so that very much we're to be serving them in a way that we are still serving the Lord. They're the Lord's children and the Lord's women. So having always him in the number one position of priority in the life, I feel like I have a newfound confidence that I may be more successful in this life as well. And just lastly, because, and then if you guys could speak on this, what I had noticed was that the very first thing it said, that Pigeon, when he went, oh crap, I didn't do A, B, C, D, and then he fell into the net, right? It said that he neglected his pious activities. So can you guys speak on what those are and maybe what he falls short on doing and what we should be doing?
Maybe we'll comment a little bit on that. Maybe we'll just take Trish's comment before we address that question.
Yeah, very great class, you guys. I'm very impressed. I wanted to say that I don't know if you guys have heard, like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can prevent ourselves from going into that state of mind as far as possible, then it'll be a lot easier to dig ourselves out when we do slip up sometimes. And so we can do that by I got the advice one time, or I got somebody told me one time that in Grihastha ashram, when you have a significant other, when you have children, you can just see these people as ashramites. How we are here in Krishna house with all of these wonderful Vaishnavis around us. practicing Krishna consciousness, going to Mangalarti, doing service together, talking about spiritual topics, we can do that with our family in the same way and just see them first and foremost as devotees. And then we can understand, yeah, they're devotees and they're my, husband or wife or my children. But that's like a side note. The most important part is that they're devotees of Krishna, and I am the servant of the devotees of Krishna, and therefore I can serve them. Like Jonathan was saying, I can serve these people with my whole heart with that understanding. And also when things are going very well is the best time to kind of contemplate that the fact that this bodily relation doesn't mean anything. What means something really is the soul relationship and the relationship between devotees. Because when things go south, it's going to be harder to think about that. So we practice when things are going well.
Yeah, I think that kind of talks about the pious activities that we were mentioning. It's like for our like spiritual life, like the cultivation of these, like this knowledge, practicing of chanting and reading of scriptures, that's the pious activities we are looking for at the times where everything is good. Because then when things are bad, it's said that when you shake a glass, what is inside of the glass comes out. Like if those positive cultivation is what we have inside, the time of distress, when we're shaken, those things will come out, like the positive values that we have like cultivated, the knowledge that we have received, the understanding that these people are these ashramites. Like in the Grihastha ashram, you might think that, maybe I'm the ashram leader and my kids are my ashram residents, so I have to take care of them. So it's had that's a wonderful point, that having that mentality of these are my fellow ashram residents and I should take care of them as they're parts and parcels of Krishna. That's a pious activity we're trying to cultivate. Probably that's what he missed out on. He did not like go through all this. He was always engaged in satisfying his wife, like whatever she would want, he would get that because that's what satisfied him. And so this is what he missed out on. I think there's one also important aspect that we are talking about, which was missing in the story of the pigeon. Which was that he was alone, like in the forest. He did not have association or anyone to like look up to or ask for like guidance at this difficult time. It was just him, his wife, and his family. And so the value of association, like the relationships that we have cultivated while in the good times, like, and we need to make sure that we are in association. We cannot just think that once we have Grihastha ashram, like my wife and kids are there, I can just, wherever I get a job, I can go to a distant land, I can just be there, practice my own spiritual life, but it's going to be very hard. We need to make sure that we're around like-minded, like people who keep us like on track.
Yeah, this is definitely the part of setting up the environment and just being prepared, because this will happen. And also just like, even if you're not interested or it's hard to think family life because we're so young, the whole goal of life is that at the end, when we have to change bodies, that we can think of Krishna and that can be our last thought, but that won't happen without any practice. So this is like every single day, that cultivation of pious activities is what at the end, when it's our time to leave the body, our only thing on our mind is Krishna, and our consciousness can be fixed on Krishna so that we return to him and we don't take another body. I wanted to also mention, I guess, a couple exercises that can help when we think about taking advantage of another jiva because we don't have a control of our lust. One is because the soul is not the body, you can think of if in this life you have a daughter, a son, or a father, or mother, that soul ends up taking the body of that person could have been your mother or your father in a previous life. So have that in your mind, because definitely will make you think twice about what you want to do. The second thing, just a mental exercise for you all. The second thing is I mean, we didn't touch on this a lot, but hopefully it's known that this is a balance and that family life is still very important and core to Krishna. I mean, in the stories, we see Krishna loves his mother and loves that relationship, not the body, but the relationship that he has with his mother is very important. And like I said earlier, it's one aspect of the material world that is our guru. We can learn so much from family life. It's just important that we remember that this is a teaching rather than our enjoyment. And then if we need another exercise, it's thinking that the specific family that we have, this specific body, we will have infinite families if we decide that we want to stay in this material life. So after our death, we will have another mother, another father. Each one is so unique though and so special, but it's one of infinite. So yeah, don't get too attached to one of them.
Bhakti Prabhu, Samisha and Shruti Prabhu. I've been looking at the chat and responding to it. Is that Advaita Prabhu? He made a caption when you talk about ashramites. He said ashramites are not termites. So t-shirt caption, ashramites, not termites. Like we should treat our family members as ashramites, not something we have to get rid of, termites.
And the family. They eat everything.
It's case by case.
I was thinking about the question you asked initially, but when Sripadav Goswami talks so much about family life throughout the whole Bhagavatam. And I was reflecting that, yeah, it is there so often in many sections, it's so heavy about sex life. Because that is what really ultimately binds us to the material world. And my Prabhupada said that in Shaktas, the material world sex life. And I was thinking, yeah, when we get attached to a person, especially in that way, then it's so, the attachment is so strong, like we reflect on, when you're younger, like have infatuations and our first love, and the first heartbreak, it pinches someone, you remember fondly. And so it's just so strong actually, and that's why Bhagavatam is so heavy about it at times because it is actually so strong. But the good side is that Bhagavatam also speaks about how you could actually have a family life that is Krishna conscious, how to engage that, like anything else really. I mean, how to engage a career, how to engage, their skills to engage, dovetail their family life into Krishna consciousness. So it gives both, it doesn't just denigrate family life, because sometimes that's a mistake devotees do. Yeah. They make that like, oh, this is so bad, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna stay, single all my life, even though it's so hard. It doesn't really work. It's just no, actually gonna use it in Christian service in the best possible way.
And that's what is taking a picture out of context, just like reading one verse and saying that this is bad, so I'm gonna stay single my whole life. We know that most of us are actually will become have a family in the future. And Kalakanta Prabhu often speaks on this fact that being in a family setting actually makes us very humble, realizing that we're not at the center. If you think about it the right way, when you have kids and you have to serve them as parents, you realize that that person has become the center of the family and you're not at the center, and that makes you a lot humble. And then at the time of serving your kids, if you have the right mindset, you can actually remember Krishna with that humility, and can serve your family members with that humility. And yeah, it's a great, Nick was saying, it's a great source as a guru. It's a great teaching mechanism that we have. It's an essential teaching source that we have, so that we become humble and not become proud as renunciates, but humble that this is a situation that I've been put in. How do I pray to Krishna here? It's not just a side thing that some people take to family life, but it's actually a core aspect of most of our lives is going to go through.
I was just also thinking that people might be very into celibate life but know that they have this weakness, and so they join Grihastha ashram because they feel like they're too weak, to stay renunciate, but then they don't give themselves to that role. They hold back from actually taking that position as a husband or a wife or a parent, and that can be really detrimental. In order to to properly raise Krishna conscious children, the parents have to be very like loving and gentle, and they have to be fully in that role. They can't be a grihastha with a brahmachari mindset.
Yeah.
That's not gonna satisfy the family.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was one thought. Another thought is that by having Krishna conscious children, we need more of them because they're the future of this movement, preaching and having devotee children. Islam religion is growing, the fastest growing religion in the world, because they have every family has so many children. And so they're taking over the world. We can do that too.
Have more kids. Okay.
Like,
Can I
yeah,
just
grihastha
say-
ashram-
I liked that first point you made. I already forgot, what was your first point?
Going to family life with like.
Oh,
Not actually like.
Giving ourselves.
yeah, I really liked recently experienced just accepting where you're at and accepting what you feel. And sometimes like we're not at the status, at the level of what we read. And so we can falsely think, oh, this is what I should be doing, so I'm not going to do it. But then we just are escaping our reality and we're trapping what we actually feel. And it's rather better we accept how we feel and then we try to work with that. It's a wonderful point.
Thank you everyone for your fruitful discussion and inputs. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Mahaprasade Govinde Nam Hari Vaishnavi Swapa Puryanam Vishwas Person of the faith in Mahaprasad.